Yeah. Oh, for the record, this is not a debate. It's just a conversation, a discussion. Obviously we're going to
Yeah.
share our disagreements, but it's going to be a respectful discussion between Panah and I. So I don't want anybody to look at this like, oh, he killed him here. No, it's just understanding each other's perspectives because there are people in the audience who agree with me, and there are people in the audience who agree with Panah. So it'd be good for us to just, with respect, even if we end up just saying, hey, man, I agree to disagree with you on that, we can at least walk away understanding each other better. You dig what I'm saying?
Yeah, bet.
All right, my bad. So Panah, I guess let's start from the top so the audience knows, like, just while we're having the conversation. Like, I'll let you share where, maybe for you why you wanted to have the conversation, man.
Well, you was going back and forth with somebody named King David. Um, Came in the room, of course, started talking. We do our, back and forth, and it ended up calming down a little bit, so we was able to come to you know, a certain place where we could, have a discussion about it. So that's why we're here. We chose to go back and forth on Deuteronomy 29 concerning the covenant. So, I'm willing to have the build for a little bit. So I'm here.
I can dig it, man. So as far as Deuteronomy 29, so everybody knows at least, what our perspectives are. So I take the perspective in verse 11 that the stranger there is the non-Israelite. And Panah, and forgive me if I'm misrepresenting you. You take the perspective that the stranger there are Israelites.
Yes, strangers in Deuteronomy 29 are
Okay, I
Israelites.
got you. So, so I'm pretty much just going to ask some of the things I already asked, and then you can ask the same things you already asked. Um, Help me see it from your viewpoint, so I can understand your viewpoint regarding Deuteronomy 29 verse 11. So like kind of walk me through the thought process as far as stranger there. Like you were explaining earlier certain things, and the audience may not have heard it because some people are just coming into the room. So this way we can kind of understand each other. Um, you had mentioned categories. Like if you could please walk me through that.
Right,
That out. Yeah,
right. So, classifications, right? This is why it says your wives, your little ones. It talks about officers, things of that nature. So you see classes. Another class that goes overlooked sometime is the sojourner. The sojourner could have been someone who was considered the fatherless, a widow, someone who was sojourning with a family member is a stranger. And I think sometimes when people see that word stranger, they automatically think non-Israelite, right? So let's read it really quick. It says, your little ones, your wives, and thy stranger that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water. So it's just simply talking about different classes of people, from the heads all the way on down to those who are considered to be low in society. So the Lord, He has laws concerning the stranger, and the children of Israel was supposed to take care of the stranger, meaning their brethren, their neighbor, one who may have fallen on hard times, living with someone, widow. I gave certain examples. So this is why I'm saying this is not talking about non-Israelites, but these are Israelites in the classification as a sojourner or stranger.
got you. By the way, J-Man, governor's on stage. You said nobody was going to come up on stage? My bad.
Yeah, I fixed it. No, that was my fault. Yeah, I clicked something else. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Panah. So I'll tell you at least, and I hear what you're saying, Panah. I think if we're talking about the category of what's being mentioned, so you have the people of Israel, and then you have a group called strangers. And if we're talking about that, from the hewer of the wood to the drawer of the water is in category even onto the lowliest, because I think you and I will agree that the strangers, from both of our perspectives, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but you can correct me if I am. The stranger doesn't always have to be just hewer of the wood and drawer of the water, right? You can have a stranger that has a position of prominence in Israel, correct?
Repeat that question. You muted. You muted. Repeat that question. You muted
I'm
up.
sorry. I was saying that when it says from the hewer of the wood to the drawer of the water, I think, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, because I don't want to misrepresent you. The hewer of the wood and the drawer of the water, even if you take the perspective that that's an Israelite, obviously I don't take that perspective, but it, like you were saying, it's talking about even onto the lowlies of society. So I would agree with the proposition. Obviously, I disagree with the application. You get what I'm saying? But from your perspective, the the stranger that is hewer of wood and drawer of water, um, it does not mean that all the strangers in Israel were hewers of wood and drawers of water. Correct?
Well, Israelites had to be hewers of wood and drawers of water in their own society.
No, no. I mean, what I'm saying is that you have strangers that grew the positions of prominence within Israel. So it wouldn't be the case that the stranger is only hewer of wood and draw of water. That of course you have that category of people,
Oh,
but
I see what you're
the
saying. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it depends on it depends on what points in history you're talking about. Like you have Doeg who worked for Saul, things of that nature. It doesn't mean that that non-Israelite was just in what he was doing because he was appointed by a king who obviously was rejected. You get what I'm saying? So, I think according to the standards of the law, concerning the stranger and the entering of the covenant, this is simply just denoting Israelites who are hewers of wood and drawers of water, because in their very own society, they did hew wood and they did draw water. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And of course, there are passages that talk about strangers hewing wood and drawing water. Of course, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But I wonder if it's for you when you're saying the word stranger, do you treat the word stranger as categorically impoverished Israelites? Like, meaning when you're saying stranger, it means only poor Israelites, or how do you generally understand that?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be impoverished. Um, like I said before, if a widow, if her husband dies, and how is the land going to be redeemed? What if she can't redeem the land? What if there's no kinsman redeemer? Well, she will go sojourn with a relative or a friend and things of that nature, and she would be a sojourner. Doesn't mean that she's impoverished, but that's just one example. Levites were considered sojourners. You didn't have inheritance to land, so they were taken care of by the people. So there's different contexts, and yes, someone who does like we talked about this in the other room. When the Lord talks about taking care of the fatherless were obviously children who didn't have fathers. So normally they would probably suffer conditions of being impoverished, but we were supposed to take them in. They were supposed to sojourn with us. We weren't supposed to let them run around as orphans. So, yes, there are cases where one who falls to poverty can be known as a sojourner or a stranger as well.
Okay. Okay. I guess the disconnect in my mind. So obviously we have disagreement on this, and I want the audience to see that we can at least cordially agree to disagree. But so the disconnect in my mind, I guess, comes from when one begins to read verse 10. So I guess just for a point of agreement, I'm not doing this to try to catch you up or anything like that, but no, it's just a point of agreement. We can agree that Moses is talking directly to the physical descendants of Jacob when he says, "You are standing here this day," right? When he's using that kind of language, there's a immediate audience he's speaking to directly, right?
Right.
Okay. So the part where it disconnects for me, so you can understand my thought process, because I'm trying to understand yours. I really am. Um, the way that I see the text reading is that you have Moses obviously talking to the physical descendants of Jacob in the immediate sense. So verses 10 and 11, right? It says, and I'll read it so you understand, so you can see where I'm going with this. So Deuteronomy 29, and for those who are following along, it's verses 10 and 11. So in verse 10, I see where it says, You are standing today, all of you, before the Lord your God, the heads of your tribes, your elders and your officers, all the men of Israel, right? So he's speaking to all the men of Israel in that first part of, where verse 10 is talking about, the elders of your tribes, all that. So it's being clarified who he's talking to, all the men of Israel. Your little ones, clearly the little ones cannot be the men of Israel. So categorically, because we do agree in the sense that there are categories here. Categorically, it is indicating the male and female children, because the children can't just be merely the male children. It has to be the female children as well. Your wives. So generally speaking, this would be in reference to the women of Israel. And now it goes, and the stranger that is in your camp. Where it's a disconnect for me is that the way that I see it is that it can't be the men. The stranger cannot be the men because they were already mentioned. They can't be the male and female children because they were just mentioned, and it can't be the wives, the women. So it has to be another category of people. And then from your perspective, I understand what you're saying. You're saying categorically it's talking about impoverished Israelites. I don't know if the text permits that to be understanding, only because you have category distinctions. And obviously it says from the hewer of the wood to the drawer of the water. And we have passages elsewhere in the Tanakh where it talks about the Canaanites being hewers of wood and drawers of water. You get what I'm saying? So,
Right.
uh, so
But
when
because
we,
go
yeah,
ahead, go ahead.
no, go
Yeah,
ahead. Go
but
ahead.
because you have a particular argument to fit non-Israelites, you'll read this in your question. See, but see, if it said the men, why is it listing strangers if Israelite men are sojourners? I don't understand that. But see, you have to do the same thing with everything else because it says your elders. Elders are men. Your officers, they're men, right? With all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives. So it's just going down on a classification scale on what all of these men, right, what they oversee. And of course, those who weren't, maybe strong enough financially to be overseers over the congregation or the camps, right? They were most likely considered sojourners under these other chiefs, elders, officers, etc. So that's why I would still say that these are Israelite sojourners, sojourning amongst their own.
So I'm seeing how you're trying to connect those dots, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful in how I say that. Just I'm being honest that for me, the way that the text reads, I don't see that in the text. And the reason that I'm saying that is in this text in particular. I'm not talking about perhaps there are other texts. You know what I mean? But if we're just reading this text right now, it seems to be the case since the Israelites are still on their way to the promised land, right? They're still on their journey. There's a people that's with them. The people that are with them, um, because we were mentioning this earlier, I feel like maybe this part wasn't brought out for the audience. So I'll just bring out this part just for a point of clarity for everybody else. In the other room, Panah and I, we were talking about the mixed multitude of Exodus 12, right? While the word mixed multitude isn't being used in this passage, so the word mixed multitude, ereb rab, rab ereb, is in reference to like a mixture of a multitude of people, a mixture of people. Generally, that's how it's defined in lexicons like Brown, Driver, Briggs, and other lexicons for the Hebrew. I think the issue that I see here for me in how I'm interpreting this text, and I think how you're interpreting the text, is it seems to be the case that the mixed multitude people, even though you had the event in Numbers 11, and I know you take a different perspective because I wanted people to hear your perspective, but I wanted them to hear mine first so they can see where our point of disagreement is. So in Numbers 11, there is a group of people, both of the mixed multitude and of Israel, who desired quail, and they didn't want the manna. God is kindled in his anger against them, and then he destroys those specific people. Clearly, he doesn't destroy all the Israelites, and he doesn't destroy all the mixed multitude people, because in the next chapter, you still have Moses, Aaron, Miriam, along with Moses' Ethiopian wife. So clearly, not all the mixed multitude people were destroyed. And then Numbers 15 gives commandments regarding those same mixed multitude people. Because the term stranger and mixed multitude in the context, because there are times when stranger can be used for Israel, but there are also times when it can be used for non-Israelites. There are times when it's used for both, and we can get into that a little bit later. But in terms of at least in the book of Numbers, there's seems to be a consistency where stranger and mixed multitude are being used to indicate the same group of people. But from your perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least going back to Exodus 12:38. Help me understand from your group's perspective how you guys interpret Numbers 12:38. Exodus 12:38. Pardon me,
All right,
and then the mixed multitude of the book of Numbers. Yeah.
Exodus chapter 12 verses 38 is this simply. Um, let's read down right here. If you guys start from verse 37, it says, "And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot. See, that were men beside children." So, what was with the men? It says, and a mixed multitude went up also with them. A lot of people like to say the with them in this case is all the Israelites. No, it's just simply talking about with the men. It says, and flocks and herds, even very much cattle. So, like we discussed in the room prior to this, my position on the mixed multitude doesn't just simply denote non-Israelites. It's talking about who went up with the 600,000 men on foot, the camels, the flocks, the herds, the children, and the wives. So the mixed multitude does not just denote non-Israelites. Yeah, was there an Ethiopian wife with Moses? Yes, I'm not arguing that. Did they enter into the covenant? No. So I'm not going to say that there was a multitude of non-Israelites uh with the children of Israel when they came out because of Exodus 12, and then we can jump to Numbers chapter 11 and just make suggestions that all the non-Israelites died that were with them, because I don't take the position that that's talking about non-Israelites, because there's a context and a word there for the word mixed, and it's not Arab, right? So let's go to Numbers chapter 11, verses 4, and it reads for Numbers chapter 11, verses 4, right? That word is aspesuf, right? It says gathered up, assemblage, promiscuous assemblage, right? So let's read it. It says, and
I'm
the
sorry for not
mix,
just on that point. I didn't not the word, but the chapter. I mean the chapter and the verse in particular.
Numbers 11, verse 4,
Numbers 11 and what again?
verse 4.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. So my position is that this particular multitude that is being written of, um, this multitude caused Israel to go a lusting, meaning there was Israelites amongst Israelites that caused Israel to go a lusting and want to go back to Egypt. Okay, so it was a multitude that rose up that God had to destroy. Has nothing to do with heathen, has nothing to do with non Israelites. This was a promiscuous assemblage of Israelites, just like you see with Korah and other places, right? So let's read it really quick. It says, and the mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again, and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, etc., etc. So God is upset because Israelites are remembering that they were eating better in Egypt, And because of this promiscuity, because they wanted to desire other flesh rather than the manna, right? God destroyed them because it caused Israel to go a lusting. So I don't take the position that these were heathen that got destroyed in a multitude. These were Israelites who were promiscuous at the time, and the Lord destroyed them from amongst the congregation.
Okay. So obviously we have a point of disagreement here, and the point of disagreement for me is in Exodus 12:37 and 38. So, which I appreciate that you're sharing your perspective. Even if we disagree, I appreciate the respect in sharing your perspective.
Yeah, likewise, likewise.
So in verses 37 and 38, um, categorically, I see something very similar to what's occurring in Deuteronomy 29. So you understand how my thought process works, right? You have the men, the women, and the children being listed, right, in verse 37 of Israel. So it seems that there are category distinctions to indicate, look, these are the people of Israel, the men, the women, and the children. Men there doesn't have to indicate specifically any age insofar as for adult men. It could be a man who's of marriageable age, but it could also be an older man. Likewise with the women, but the children are clearly in reference to children that are not yet adults, meaning people who have not yet reached the age of marriageable age. So when you get to 38, that's where I feel the grouping is no longer in reference to the people of Israel, because in the Hebrew text, in the specific Hebrew text, I can actually get this thing to load. It begins with a conjunctive wa when it's talking about the mixed multitude people. So actually, let me. Oh no, actually, I'm tripping. Hold on, I'm in the wrong. My apologies. Hold on, so I can point this out. So I can. Pardon me. Yeah. So in the Hebrew text, pardon me, there's a conjunctive wa at the beginning of gam, meaning where gam means and also. So like and also categorically, I see that as being in reference to a different category of people altogether that are also leaving with them, right? Because the different category of people is wegam erev rab, meaning and also a mixed multitude. Now, the part about the flocks, because when you says they went up, where it says Allah itam, meaning went up with them, then when you see where it says wishon, and then it mentions ubakar, so wishon and flocks and herds. So and I think is indicative of it's something else along with the mixed multitude. It wouldn't be that these things are necessarily a part of the mixed multitude people. That's my thought process in looking at the Hebrew, because I think the grammar is pretty clear in what's occurring here. You have conjunctive was at the beginning of those phrases that are indicating that this, along with the subject, which would be the Arab Rab, are leaving out of Egypt with the people of Israel. So the people of Israel are the 12 tribes, and specifically the men, the women, the children, and then you have the mixed multitude also leaving with them. And with the mixed multitude also are leaving herds, cattle, the different, animals that left with them. And so when we get to Numbers 11, right now, this is within the wilderness context. Um, and I respect that you shared your viewpoint on lusting, because the word there is used for like a strong craving or desire, but I disagree with you, so you can understand. And I'm not doing this to be disrespectful. I do appreciate you for sharing your viewpoint. Like, I'm being sincere. I'm not just saying that to just say it to say it. I sincerely do appreciate you for sharing your viewpoint. And feel free to interact with me, Panay. You don't have to stay muted the whole time. You can
Yeah,
always interact
yeah.
with
I
me.
know you do like to be long-winded, but but I'm listening, man. I'm just trying to take everything in that you're
Yeah, yeah.
saying. But go ahead.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I
no,
hear
no.
you.
We're having a dialogue, because a lot was said, and I feel like there's a lot that has to be
Right,
unpacked.
right,
So
right.
forgive me if I'm being long winded. I'm
Nah, you
just
good. You good.
yeah.
I'll come off mic when I need to.
Okay, so in Numbers 11, the relevant word that you mentioned for craving is the word ta'awa, right? So there, it's indicating that they are craving, and that word, um, the way that it's defined here is in reference to lusting after. Now, you were correct in saying that they were lusting after flesh, but it was like flesh of food, not necessarily like, because you were mentioning promiscuous. Maybe I wasn't understanding the usage of promiscuous, but the way that it's
The word
yeah.
mixed in mixed multitude.
Oh, the word mix. That's what you were
Yes,
focusing in on. Okay,
yes,
I see.
yes, yes.
Okay, I see.
It's not Irab.
No, I understand. It's the word for rabble. So, like, if you read other translations, they'll say like a rabble. Uh, so you're taking the word there for rabble to mean um
Which is why my position is it's not just denoting or making any
mm,
correlation to Exodus 12. It's just
yeah.
simply explaining that they caused a a rabble. These were Israelites who caused an uproar because they wanted to go back to Egypt. So God destroyed them because this is the promiscuity that they brought upon Israel and desiring to eat other flesh.
So the word asasuf is, so I'm looking at Bible Hub and it says that term refers to a mixed group of people, often seen as a rabble or crowd that is not a part of the main group. In the context of Israelites, it denotes a group of non-Israelites who joined the Israelites during the Exodus from Egypt. This group is often associated with causing unrest or dissatisfaction among the Israelites. And I'm not doing that to, don't take this as like I'm trying to, get you in a gotcha.
No, I
It's more
get it.
like,
I know the definition, but I don't agree
yeah,
with the usage of
mm,
how it's being used. I don't believe this has anything to do with non-Israelites.
okay. I, so I guess the part for me, because the word rabble is being used there, and rabble mixed multitude, it seems to have a common connotation, and this is why scholars take this position. Much like when it's in reference to non-Israelite, stranger, mixed multitude. When it's in contrast to the people of Israel, generally speaking, it denotes a non-Israelite people. But because where I have the disconnect in my mind, and again, are for you, and I'm asking this for you, are the people in Exodus 12:38, the Erev, are those people Israelites or non-Israelites for you? I guess.
So if you look at my PTR, this is why if you pull to refresh, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the same position that I have.
Uh huh.
This is the Hebrew Bible now, right?
Yeah.
Right. This is Exodus chapter 12. Um, let me get it real quick.
Hmm.
Verse
Yeah, I see where
37.
it's. Yeah, I see it.
Right. Right. It says, "And the Bnei Yisrael journeyed from Ramses towards Succoth, about 600,000 Gibberim." We know that Gibberim is the men on foot. It says, not counting women and children.
Hmm.
So what's being counted with them, right, is what's about to be listed. Who's the them? The men, not counting women and children. So it says, verse 38, and Arav, and then in Erev Rav, mixed multitude, a mixed company that was large, went also with them. Watch, semicolon. So they're separate but having the same thought. And Tizan and herds and very many domestic animals. So what I'm saying is the mixed multitude is talking about the wives, children, all the animals, meaning they came out in a big mixed multitude, donkeys, camels, you name it. It didn't have anything to do with non-Israelites.
Okay. Now, Pana, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful in how I say this, but um, are you able to read the Hebrew there by any chance?
I could see it there.
Okay, because the word for negation, lo, is not used in that text, and this is what I wanted to do if I could real quick. So I'm posting this in the chat. If you see in the chat, you'll notice that this is the verse in question, 37. The word for negation isn't used there. You'll see it in the interlinear. It's not being utilized there. So this is where I wouldn't. try to utilize an English translation, because English translations, as you well know, are simply meta commentaries of the text, but they are not the original text itself, right? So if the word there is not being used for the word of negation, then I don't see that as being the word not as being a valid reading. That's added to the English, but it doesn't reflect what the Hebrew is saying. The Hebrew, um, the Hebrew text itself, I believe, is making it clear that it's just making the distinction between men and women and children, because it mentions men besides, the children. When it talks about, pardon me, here, let me,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, not does not have to be there. Aside from
Hmm.
is there. So it's simply denoting there were women and children there, but counted amongst the 600,000 men, there was a mixed
Hmm.
multitude, which the mixed multitude is talking about the women and children as well.
Okay. Well, I I think the issue is that if we understand within these patriarchal societies, right? So like in the New Testament, for example, when it says you are all sons of God. Here, I'll give an example biblically because I don't want to just shoot from the hip. So you can kind of see the Hebraic mindset here. When you go to Genesis 5, you'll notice that he says he created them in the beginning, male and female, and called their name Adam, even though Adam is a masculine name that denotes mankind. Um, their men and women are both, I guess, categorically in species Adam. Thus, when you see words like sons or you see that kind of expression, for example, if you go to First Chronicles chapter 2, verse 31, you'll notice that Shishan, who had no sons but daughters, has a inheritor, and it says the bene. It's used in the construct state there. The bene of which obviously the root of bene is ben, which means son, um, uh, and the son would be Ahlai, right? Ahlai is considered the surrogate son of Shishan. There are instances where son doesn't just merely denote just mere men. There are times contextually where it can also include males and females.
Yeah, like
When-
children. I know you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
So,
children of Israel.
right. So, verse 37, I guess, if we understand that contextually, because clearly the men aren't just leaving alone without women, and so they would have to be categorically included in verse 37. 38, however, because we know there are non-Israelites that are here. I'll give an example. If we go to Leviticus 24, 10 and 11, Shelomith of the tribe of Dan, her father is Dibri of the tribe of Dan. Shelomith, who's called Yisraelit in the Hebrew, she's married to a man who is Mizri, who is Egyptian, a Egyptian. There's an example of a non-Israelite person who is married to her. And of course, you did say that Moses had also an Ethiopian wife, so you were in agreement at least in that part with me. Obviously, you're not in agreement with my interpretation, but at least in that part, I think we both agree. So I think I've said a lot, but I think what's more relevant is since mixed multitude and rabble can be used interchangeably, and because there's already a context that dictates in verse 38 that these people are not the Israelites. They're a people distinct from them, because that's exactly how Brown Driver Briggs defines the word there for Rebrab, that it's a people that's not Israelites leaving with them. And we
Yeah,
see examples of these people
but
in other
but
books.
faithful. Can Irav also have anything to do with light, dark?
Of course, in the book of Genesis, it's the word that's used in Genesis 1. I I would
For what
say,
word?
however, it's the word for um, so in the English, so there's a
Evening.
bit, yeah, it's the word
Right.
for the mixture of evening and day. But I think and of course that word can also have the kind of dualistic connotation, because there's another word that's used there, so it's almost like mixing and splitting, if you will, that's being used there. And this is how the rabbis understood it when they were looking at the text, that there's like kind of like a little bit of wordplay going on there, dualistic. Of course, the immediate context would mean evening, morning, when it's talking about boker and ereb. But I think the issue here is that, at least in the way that it's being used, because it's qualified with the word erev rab. Erev is just the word for mixed or mixing, and then rab is the word for multitude. multitude has to be in reference in that immediate context to people because the animals are being distinguished from them in the grammar of the Hebrew. You get what I'm saying?
I got you. So hold on real quick. I know your favorite version is the ESV, right?
Yeah. It's not my favorite
Yeah.
version. I use other versions, but the one that I generally grab because it's the quickest to grab because it's the first one that shows up when I open up my app is usually the first
Right.
version that shows up. It's not like my favorite. It's the one most convenient to grab.
Right. So this is why I continue to say what I'm saying. Hold on. If I could open up this damn Bible app. Oh, I can't. I can't open up the Bible app for some reason.
Okay.
I gotta update it. But anyway, in the GNT, it's the same. It's the same as this Hebrew Bible now. It says not counting women and children. So we're gonna go. We're gonna go on and on all night.
Okay.
If we just argue with words,
Yeah.
right? But in other versions, I wanted to prove that it's simply saying 600,000 men, not counting women and children.
Well, real quick, just for
So
the GNT. So the
yeah,
GNT is not a word for word translation.
I got you.
So so
It's
you're
thought for
aware
thought,
of the yeah, yeah. So you're aware of the dynamic and formal equivalents, right, in
right?
translations.
Yeah,
So, like for example, a scholar wouldn't use the GNT because it's not the word for word Hebrew. If they were to use a English translation at all, they would generally go with something that's more word for word. You get what I'm saying?
right.
So I
So
yeah,
if you even, but even if you use the King James, what does it say in the King James, which is word for
I
word?
see. Well, there, I think if we look at the King James, I would say that, and again, I think you will agree with me because you will agree that there are translations you um, aren't always in lockstep with. But I will, let me actually take a look because I forgot how the King James reads there. Verse where it says men besides children. That's what it says. So this is how the King James reads. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot, men besides children. And of course, men there need not just be relegated to only the males. It can be also women. It can include the women. That's why, for example, and I'm not saying you have to agree with the ESV, just so you can
Hmm.
understand what I'm saying. Let me actually pull it up real quick. Yeah, where it says besides women and children, the implication is that you have men, women, and children that are leaving out of Egypt together. It's not just males that are leaving. You get what I'm saying?
Right. But see now how I see this being read is just summarizing. It's just telling a story simply. It says, and the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. Right.
Hmm.
So yeah, the children of Israel are the ones coming out of Egypt. And it says about 600,000 on foot that were men. So when you says beside children, meaning apart from children. So it's not counting the children. These are 600,000 men. So it's a continuation from verse 37 into 38. It says, and a mixed multitude went up also with them. This is the 600,000 men and flocks and herds and very much cattle, because it didn't count the wives and the children. So
Well, that's where we
these other
disagree. I believe that they are being
right.
counted in that verse. That's
So
why
you
I'm bringing
believe
that
that
up.
the wives and the children are being counted with the 600,000?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you believe the word givarim means? A woman can be a gabar?
I'm sorry. Say that again. Gibarim.
Yeah, givarim is the word for um let me see where is that? It says 600,000 on foot that were men.
Hmm.
That word is givarim.
Okay, I see. So you're of the position that when it uses that word, um, that the word is only in reference to males, like only males.
Right, it is.
Okay.
So that's why I'm telling you the mixed multitude is talking about the wives, the children, and the
Okay.
animals that were with them.
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying. I kind of follow where you're going with this. Okay.
Right.
All right. And so you're taking now the mixed multitude you believe are the other people. Am I understanding that correctly?
Just everything else,
Meaning
everything else,
the women in the yeah,
everything else that was surrounded by the 600,000 men, their
okay.
wives, children, the cattle.
I see. And then you take the mixed multitude to mean the women, the children, and everyone else. Okay, but see, I
Yes.
think even okay, let's go with that. I can see where you're going with that. Now, because I can see where that could be a possible interpretation, certainly. I see where so working within that framework, right? If we work within that framework. Pardon me, Exodus 12:37. Let's just say the males are being accounted for in the first half. Then the second half has the mixed multitude. So let's just assume mixed multitude means women, children, but it need not only mean women, children. It can also be the native Egyptians that are also leaving with them, whether male or female. Since women need not denote only Israelite women, it can also denote Egyptian women that are married to Israelite men, and the children would obviously be the byproduct of those unions, which is precisely why we see in Leviticus 24:10 and 11 that you have the woman Shelomith married to an Egyptian man, and they have a son, and the son is his son. Obviously, he would. And when you see the law of the stranger being given for both the native born and the stranger,
Well,
there,
I don't read that to be an Egyptian man um was there and that was his son. The woman was an Israelitish woman.
yeah, the word there in the Hebrew is,
Her
yeah,
father was an Egyptian. The woman's father was an
uh-uh.
Egyptian. That boy was an Israelite.
If we go to Leviticus, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
It'll
know
be
exactly
easy.
what you're talking about. I believe that a lot of people misinterpret that too when you actually read it.
If you go to the verse though, the woman's father is because it says it in verse 11, and her father was Dibri of the tribe of Dan. So it wouldn't be the case that her father was an Egyptian. It's the other way around. She had a child with an Egyptian man, and then verse 11 qualifies it. That's why when you go to verse 11, and I'll read it in the English for people because I know if we uh, try to transliterate the Hebrew for people who don't know Hebrew, they may not understand. So in verse 11 it says. Here, I'll read verse 10 and 11. Now, an Israelite woman's son, whose father was an Egyptian, meaning the son's father was an Egyptian. And the reason we know this is because the construction of the word, how it's being constructed, it's not indicating the woman, it's indicating the son wrestled, it says, pardon me, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the people of Israel, and the Israelite woman's son and a man from Israel fought in the camp. Verse 11. And the Israelite woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed, and they brought him to Moses. His mother's name was Shelomith, the daughter of Dibri of the tribe of Dan. So Dibri is an Israelite man. That's why it's qualifying that the woman's father was of the tribe of Dan, but her child was a child that she had with an Egyptian man. That's why the word Misri is used there. Um, and to kind of help you see this a little bit more, Panah, so you can understand. And I appreciate the cordiality, even if we disagree. Um, if you look at the if you look at the way that Misri is constructed, it's in the masculine singular, right? So it would be in reference to the son, which is also in the masculine singular. So Yisraelit, which is the word that's used for her, is in the feminine construction, obviously. If it meant to say her father, it would be in the feminine construction. It wouldn't be in the masculine construction. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but see, that's I don't have a problem with the interracial marrying that was going on in Egypt. Joseph had a whole the Egyptian wife. I don't have a problem with that. Um, uh, that's actually historical.
But what I'm saying is that we have to have an accounting for these people within Exodus 12, somewhere in verse 38, because obviously verse 37 can't be in reference to this. You can't have that Egyptian man being of the men of Israel when the men of Israel are being called, you know, basically they're being identified by their tribal affiliation. They're not being identified from where they came from. This woman was identified as Yisraelit, so indicating she's of the people of Israel, a female from the people of Israel. The man that she had a child with is Mizri, meaning of the people of Egypt. Therefore, if she came out of Egypt with him, It wouldn't make any sense to identify her as an Israelite and then identify the man as an Egyptian if they both came out of Egypt. It would make sense to identify her as an Israelite and then the man as an Egyptian, precisely because when they left in Exodus 12:38, they left with a mixed multitude. Now, to your point, and I want to at least
But
be fair to your point. To your point, 38, I can see where you can encompass the women and the children in 38, but the women and the children would also have to include the stranger as well, the non-Israelite that's leaving with them, and it would have to encompass male and female from that category of people. It can't just be just the Israelites leaving with other Israelites.
but that still has nothing to do with uh the point of our argument when it comes down to, because we don't see the person there, whether it's her father was an Egyptian or him, the boy, right? So there were Israelites who mixed. Moses had an Ethiopian wife. Okay. The point is them being in the wilderness to enter into this everlasting covenant, which we don't see. I don't have a problem with there being sprinkles of non-Israelites there. I don't believe that the mixed multitude is denoting that that's non-Israelites. I believe that that's talking about the wives, the women, the children, and the cattle that are with the Gibberim, the 600,000 Gibberim. Right, the mixed multitude of Numbers 11 has nothing to do with non-Israelites. I believe that that's talking about Israelites that went and fell a lusting to cause all Israel to go a lusting, and they had to be destroyed. Right, that's the point. So I'm familiar with
Right.
Leviticus chapter
I hear where you're
24. I'm
coming from.
familiar.
Yeah, I hear where
So
you're
yeah,
coming
so I'm not gonna just say that the mixed multitude, just because this Egyptian boy cursed out, you know, blasphemed. Of course, we know the punishment of that. He ended up being destroyed. Yeah, I'm not arguing with that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not
from.
saying that there wasn't not one non-Israelite there. I'm not
Yeah.
that I'm not that super brew. Okay? I
I
told you.
got you.
I believe Ruth was a non-Israelite. I know that non-Israelites existed in the Bible, right? But I want to jump up to speed to Deuteronomy chapter 29,
Yeah.
because I
Right.
definitely do agree that there were some
Could we
non-Israelites
deal with
there.
one other thing, because it's just because I don't know your perspective on this. So
Uh-huh.
I know most of the Camp Hebrew Israelites, when they want to say Israelites are strangers, they may go to Leviticus 25, specifically in the King James reading, but which I believe has a good explanation when we read things like the
Mhm.
Aramaic Targums, because I believe the
Mhm.
Aramaic Targums offer insight into how the community of Israel would have understood those passages. Within the Targums, it seems to be indicative of non-Israelites who have converted. So, which I think is an interesting take. I'm not saying you have to agree with that take. I'm just pointing out it's an interesting take. But at least Leviticus 19, because I know Leviticus 25, I'm well aware of how that's argued. But
Mhm.
Leviticus 19, for me, 33 through 34 seems to be clearest that the uh, the stranger there that Israel is supposed to love is non-Israelites. I know you may disagree with that, but if we could talk about it, I think it would be helpful. And then we can go right back to Deuteronomy 29 and whatever you want to bring out and ask me, because I know I've asked you a lot of things. I want you to ask me questions as well. Um,
Okay, so
yeah,
you want my position on Leviticus 19:33.
33 through 34. Yeah.
Okay, so let's read it. It says, in this, if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. This is just simply like, for example, Paul was born in
You
Tarsus.
had cut out there for a second. That just that last part. There was
Yep.
something that you said and it cut out.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good now, man.
Yep. So,
Yeah, you're good now.
yep. So I'm gonna give you an example. Paul was born in Tarsus. He was not born in the land of Benjamin. When he would go to celebrate the Passover, he would be considered a stranger. There were In Acts chapter 2, there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven. They were not native born. That's why it says in the book of Acts chapter 2. Let me get it real quick. Um, let me get it. Acts 2, and I believe it's like verse 11. Acts 2 and 11. It says, matter of fact, verse 7, it says, and they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue wherein we were born? So there were Israelites who were born outside of the land who weren't native born. So one law was for one that was born in the land as well as one that was born outside of the land. Like Paul was born outside of the land. Like you see in Acts chapter 2, they were born in these lands, and so the law of the stranger is supposed to apply um equally with one who was not native born. So that's my view on Leviticus 19 and verse 33. That's simply talking about an Israelite that just sojourns in the land and he's not from there. He may
Mm,
visit, feast day, go sojourn there, he goes back. We weren't supposed to mistreat them because we ourselves was sojourners in the land, and we're not supposed to forget as Israelites where we came from, where the Lord took us from. So we're not supposed to mistreat our own brother who was not born in the land of Israel. So that's what that law is talking
mm,
about.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I would say, I guess in the immediate context of Leviticus 19, of course we disagree on this point. So, but at least we can agree respectfully. It doesn't have to be hostile. It doesn't have to be disrespectful, man. Because I understand you have your convictions about the text. I have my convictions. You know, we're not doing this because we want to be nefarious or underhanded or because we somehow don't believe in the scriptures. I believe you believe in the scriptures. I believe in the scriptures. But we are having a disagreement in interpretation, right? But I do appreciate you for sharing your viewpoint, man. Um, for me, Leviticus 19:33 through 34, I think if we qualify it with verse 34, right? Or not. And there's something in particular because I had mentioned it earlier. When I said the word stranger or ger is used generically, right? It can be used for both Israelites and non-Israelites, right? So here's an instance where I mentioned that there are times in verses where it's used for both. So in verse 34, the people of Israel are called Gerim, right? It's the plural of Ger. So it says, you were strangers in the land of Egypt. But it's mentioning the Hager, who dwells with them, right? I guess the issue for me is the qualification for you were strangers in the land of Egypt indicates that just as they were treated fairly by the Pharaoh that knew Joseph, because obviously when they were in the land of Egypt and he says, for you were strangers, it's not indicative of the Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph and was cruel to the people. It's indicative of the Pharaoh that was kind to Joseph and allowed for his family to live there, and they grew as a nation within the land precisely because the Pharaoh allows them to come into the land and to sojourn there because of the famine that was taking place in the land of Canaan. So the issue for me is that the qualification that they're supposed to love the stranger as themselves because they were strangers in the land of Egypt seems to very much imply that the people are supposed to treat this non people, meaning not their people, with dignity, just as they were treated for a time with dignity in the land of Egypt under the Pharaoh that knew Joseph. That seems to be the implication of the text. While the words the Pharaoh that knew Joseph are not in the text, that seems to be squarely what's being implied because how did the people get into Egypt? It was with the Pharaoh that was kind to Joseph's family and allowed them to grow there. And that's where I see the disconnect, if you will, because the passage is talking about when the stranger comes to your land, right? Not your land and their land, but rather your land. Because if the stranger is an Israelite, it would have to be both of their lands. But it's not. It's only the land of the people, and the stranger is coming to live with them. He's coming to sojourn with them. And I guess the implication is when he circumcises himself, if he's a male and he comes to be a part of the people, they're supposed to treat him as one of their own because they were strangers in the land of Egypt. In other words, they were treated with kindness. They need to treat this person with kindness. That seems to be the implication in that text.
The reason why I say that, right? If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 18, here's another law of the stranger, right? He's just simply teaching the children of Israel um, what I've been saying this whole time about how they're supposed to treat their brother fairly. And their love shouldn't be predicated if they were born outside of the land, speak another language, etc., etc. They're the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It says, verse 18 of Deuteronomy 10, he doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, in giving him food and raiment. That's my point to Deuteronomy 29. Verse 19, it says, love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. Right? So he's just teaching them to to show love to those who are not they're not familiar with, to show the love to those who are not native born, to show love to those who falls to hard time, things of that nature. So that's why he's always saying ye were strangers in the land of Egypt, right? Because they didn't have a place to claim as their own land at that point. So now that they have a place to claim as their own land, they were not supposed to forget the love that they were supposed to have for one who was sojourning, because they themselves were sojourners in Egypt. So yeah, that's my point. So if you want to jump it up to speed, because
Just on
I
that
can't be
point,
here all night. Yep.
yeah, just on that point, just briefly, I think the problem is that when they're coming to their land, right? The the subject of what is going on is they're coming to the stranger is coming to a land that's not theirs, just like they went to a land that was not theirs. Therefore, they're supposed to show them kindness. Now, someone in the chat had said he's saying that Egypt wasn't the house of bondage. Of course, I'm not saying that. Egypt became the house of bondage for the people of Israel, according to Exodus, the first chapter, for the Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph. That's literally what the chapter says. It literally mentions the Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. He's never named as a specific Pharaoh. We know it is a Pharaoh, though. And it says that this Pharaoh was cruel to the people, and he's the one that put them under hard bondage. But the Pharaoh that knew Joseph didn't put the people under hard bondage. The people weren't suffering under that Pharaoh. They weren't suffering up until the point of this Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. That's the big difference. I think that's the salient part. Otherwise, we would be reading about the patriarchs suffering in Egypt under the Pharaoh that knew Joseph, which didn't happen. Egypt became the house of bondage because of the Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. I'm saying that to the person in the chat. And Panah, I guess the problem is that when I read 34, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, makes sense in light of that reality that there was a time when they sojourned there peacefully and they were treated with kindness. So they're being called to treat the person that sojourns in their land who is not their people with kindness. And the reason why, and this is the salient part before we move on, the word gerim is used for you were strangers, and the hager is used for a person that's a stranger. So the connotation is you were a stranger in a land that was not your own, and you were treated in a time with kindness. So too, you must treat these people who are in a land that's not their own with kindness, meaning it's not their land. So therefore, it would negate the proposition that those people are Israelites. But of course, we agree to disagree. I know you have other things you want to talk about, and I'm not uh, doing this to be underhanded. I think you understand we disagree on this, but
Right.
I do respect for you, for sharing your viewpoint. I appreciate that because that is helpful to kind of see it from your viewpoint, and I know you see it from my viewpoint. We obviously disagree, but at least we're showing the audience that we can do this. Um, I think the way that it's supposed to be done, like we can do it with no malice in mind.
Right. Right. All right. Yep. So let's jump up to Deuteronomy 29, because it is kind of getting a little
I
late.
appreciate you, man. Yep.
All right. right? Deuteronomy chapter 29, and we had left off, and Deuteronomy 10 and 18 was the reason why I said that these strangers are sojourners, Israelite sojourners, right? Let me read it really quick so we can be reminded of why I said that. It says Deuteronomy 10:18. It says, matter of fact, verse 16. It says, circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart and be no more stiff necked, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons nor taketh reward. He doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow, and loveth the stranger, and giving him food and raiment. Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. So this is clearly talking about one who is waxing poor, one who may not have shelter, etc., etc. This does not only denote a non-Israelite. So going up to verse chapter 29 of verse 11, it reads, verse 10, it says, ye stand this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. And we know that we can argue all day, but we know that he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why he says your God, because he did the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob he's talking to. It says, your captains of your tribes, your elders, and your officers, with all the men of Israel, right? Your little ones, your wives, and thy children that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water. This goes back to that Deuteronomy chapter
You said
10.
thy children or thy stranger? I'm sorry.
Oh, your little ones, your wives, and thy stranger
Stranger.
that is
Gotcha.
in thy camp, that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water. I'm going to keep reading this, verse 12, that thou shouldest enter into covenant with the Lord thy God, and into his oath, which the Lord thy God maketh with thee this day. And this is why I'm saying these are Israelites, because he's speaking to this specific people group, these classifications, this specific nation, that he may establish thee today for a people unto himself, and that he may be unto thee a God, as he hath said unto thee, and as he hath sworn unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. So the reason why I'm saying this is because he's saying, I made an oath to your fathers. The fathers are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the descendants of these three patriarchs. Now, verse 14, it says, neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath. Right? So now, you said earlier in the other room, you were saying, oh, this is how you know it's not talking about Israelites. And I know how you know some of us break this down. We don't teach that this is talking about people outside of Israel. This is simply talking about that generation. He made an oath with them. You see that in um, Deuteronomy 27, 28, 29, those three main chapters, and Deuteronomy chapter 30. Those four main chapters basically show this event that took place. You have Mount Gerizim, you have Mount Ebal, and the children of Israel and their tribes begin to bless, and then they begin to curse. So what we're saying is that this is not talking about people outside of the nation of Israel, outside of the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but that generation. He wasn't just making that oath with just that generation alone, but for the generations to come. Watch, it says, verse 15, but with him that standeth here with us this day before the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day. So he's simply saying, I'm not making this oath only with this generation, but I'm also making this oath with the generations to come that come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because that's who he swore this oath to, and that's who entered into the covenant. And I asked you in the room before, um, if this were those non-Israelites entering into the covenant, and you said, of course they would receive the blessings and the cursings. Um, the reason why I will say also that this is not talking about non-Israelites, because in Deuteronomy 28 verse 43, it says the stranger that is within thee shall rise up above thee. I don't see the purpose of the Lord saying in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that the non-Israelite that's with them, or the stranger that's with them, if they're entering into this covenant that he swore, that they're not going to suffer the curses, but the children of Israel are. How is that stranger going to rise up above them? And then all of a sudden, how's the Lord? A part of the tenets of the curses is the stranger is going to rise up above them, that's within them, but they're going to also enter into the covenant. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So that's the
Yeah.
position that I have. So yeah, you could
And
respond.
yeah, regarding that, and obviously we have a disagreement there, but I do appreciate you for sharing your perspective, man. Um, hold on one second, 'cause I gotta give me 1 second. I'm gonna be eating this. I'm eating this little hash brown,
I'm about
man.
to say hot pocket.
Nah, eating this hash brown. So the
Faithful,
thing
you're
about
always
it
eating
is,
something, man.
I know, man. Yeah, bro. I'll be sneaking in little bites here and there. But I appreciate Panah for sharing his perspective. So Panah, I think for me in Deuteronomy 28, when it talks about the stranger, when you look at the usage of stranger, I know that there are translations that'll say resident alien. The resident alien would have been like your uncircumcised Canaanites. For example, if you go to the book of Joshua and you go to the book of Judges, you'll notice that there were still the people of Canaan that were living in those vicinities. They didn't utterly wipe them out. I believe the book of Kings also mentions them. So we know that, for example, in the book of Judges, we know that even the other nations around them in the various areas where the people of Israel lived, they took opportunities to form allegiances to attack them, which is precisely what we see occurring in Psalm, where it says they've taken crafty counsel against your treasured ones. The implication would be that the people of Israel, um, they live when they live in obedience to God. None of those people had power over them because their power was YHWH. And so I'm saying it that way because we have a disagreement in how we pronounce YHWH, but the Tetragrammaton, I'll say it that way. They trusted in the Tetragrammaton. That's the Lord Almighty, right? The Lord Almighty was their strength, like it says in the Psalms. When they were on good terms by keeping the commandments, didn't get they wouldn't be defeated in their land. They wouldn't be besieged in their gates by their enemies. Deuteronomy 28 says this would happen to them if they disobeyed. So when we see it saying in the curses, because this is one of the curses, that the stranger that was basically within their borders, which would include the enemies of Israel, specifically the enemies of Israel from the nations that they weren't supposed to have allegiances with, they would besiege them. They would start to do they would rise up against them and they would come down low. They would be the head, Israelites would be the tail. And that's exactly what we see happening in the book of Judges. That's exactly what we see happening with the nations that lived around their borders, because it need not mean inside of them. Here, let me show you so you can see what I'm talking about. Deuteronomy 28. So it's in verse 43. Verse 43. Let's grab it real quick. Here it is. Deuteronomy 28:43. Yeah, so it uses the word among you when it says Berki Beka, basically among you. So among you would be like it can indicate either in within their borders or even on the exterior of their borders, meaning the nations that were among them on the exterior, they would be besieged by them. That's exactly what we see when we see the Canaanites, the Moabites, we see the Edomites, obviously, all of these different nations. joined together to attack the people of Israel when they were in disobedience, and God Almighty allowed for them to be defeated, because that's exactly what he said would happen to them if they disobeyed him. I don't see this as being indicative of the people that is in the covenant keeping the same law, statutes, and commandments, because we have examples in the scriptures of these people going into the same captivity as the rest of the people. For example, if you read things like the New Testament, it talks about the proselyte that is among them, um, uh, the righteous proselytes, I believe in Acts 6. So proselyte is the word for convert. That word that's used there for proselyte is used in the word proselytos is used in the Septuagint, and it's used for non-Israelites. So I find it interesting that that relevant word that's used for non-Israelites is, it's used for non-Israelites that are converted, that convert, that are a part of the people. I I don't see how this makes any sense in light of that reality that you have Israelites that are joined together with non-Israelites who have converted over to their ways. Like, I think, in the Apocrypha, in the book of Tobit, no, pardon me, the book of Judith, you had Achior the Ammonite who circumcises himself and joins himself to the house of Israel. And then you have other people that join. For example, Esther 8:17 says many of the people in the Septuagint many of the Gentiles circumcised themselves and became Jews for the fear of the Jews. If they're entering into the same covenant, then they have to experience the same punishments. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense for them to be entering into the covenant and be under obligation to keep the commandments, but then not be under
Wait,
obligation to the curses.
wait, Faithful. I don't mean to be rude, but you said
Yeah.
that they circumcised themselves in Esther.
Yes.
I don't want to, because I got to get ready to go soon.
hmm
Now, I don't remember that being there. I don't
So
remember
the
seeing that they circumcised themselves in the book of
so
Esther.
the Septuagint says. So if you look at the Septuagint reading here, let me pull the Septuagint real quick. So it's in Esther 8, verse 17. This is the Septuagint. So Esther 8 and 17 in the Septuagint says, and in every city and province, wherever the ordinance was published, wherever the proclamation took place, the Jews had joy and gladness, feasting and myrrh. And many of the Gentiles were circumcised and became Jews for the fear of the Jews. This is in reference to the Persian peoples in the cities round about the people of Judah, where, remember, there was a proclamation made by the king at the behest of the evil man Haman, who was an Edomite, to destroy the people, right? And after
Right.
Haman was killed, the king couldn't overrule his previous commandment, so he gave the people that were in the lands the liberty to fight back. And obviously, God was with them, so they fought back. And in fighting back, this small multitude fought against this enormous horde of people from the Persian Empire. And many of the people who saw that were so amazed. They were in fear because they were like, wow, like this small multitude is doing this against this large amount of people, that they decided they wanted to join them. So they circumcised themselves according to the Septuagint reading
Well,
and became
the
Jews.
reason why I will disagree with that as well is because there's some scrutiny behind books outside of Torah when people say it's Septuagint, um, because we know the Septuagint only consisted of the Torah, the first 5 books. So I mean, that's a
Initially considered the Torah, yeah, but then the other books were translated afterwards. That Encyclopedia Britannica says that.
well,
But all of these
I
are
mean,
BC era. You know what I mean?
right. Hey, listen, Faithful, I ain't even gonna lie, man. I definitely was prejudiced in my in my take in the other room. So you'll have to forgive me. But this was actually a very, very good build.
Yeah,
I
I
definitely
agree.
am pressed for
Yeah,
time. I'm definitely pressed for time. Hopefully in the future we can have a talk like this.
yeah,
And I hope we could do this. We could do this again sometime in the future.
of course.
But I definitely am pressed for time. I gotta go.
Wait, before you go though, Panah, I just
You
wanted to
know,
say real quick,
yeah.
just on the point of, because I know there may be a room being made by Ram Gadol to review some of the things I said. So,
Not even, man.
uh, in
We
Exodus,
not clickbait. We never
No, no,
took
because
nothing from
you
you.
know how it is, man. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
You know
yeah.
how it is, man. No, but in Exodus 37 and 38, just to be clear, even if I look at that viewpoint, because I certainly was looking at the Hebrew and I was like, I see what he's seeing there. I certainly saw at the very least in verse 37. So I can see where you see verse 38 in that fashion. So I wanted to at least say that up front. And so, but within that framework, hopefully, at least if you ever get a chance to think about it, even if you never agree with me, but at least you can understand, because obviously I don't agree with you. Um, 38 wouldn't preclude non-Israelite people from being amongst that mixed multitude. Even if you're saying it's Israelite women and children, it wouldn't preclude non-Israelite women and children or non-Israelite men. You get what I'm saying? Especially because we never got a chance to read at the bottom with the Passover and everything else. That would have been interesting to get into. Maybe we can do that another time. But I
We
wanted you
definitely
to
can.
at least understand that part. You know where I was coming from. I certainly understand where you're coming from. Even if we agree, man. Hey,
I understand
um,
where you're coming from on that.
yeah.
All right.
You know, I know in your doctrine, you know, I'm Ephraim in your doctrine, and you know, so
Right.
at least we could have respect and show people that even this, you know, diverging viewpoints can have conversations where we don't have to be
Right.
disrespectful. We don't got to be volatile. So I
Right.
respect you for
Right.
that, and
I
I
appreciate you and I
appreciate the
respect you
conversation.
for that too, for real. Nah, I'm wholeheartedly. I appreciate you. All right, y'all. I got to get ready to go.
Yep, take it easy, man. Peace, man.